The room didn't just go quiet, it cracked. Because what was supposed to be a celebration of legacy turned into a full-blown emotional detonation when DaBrat allegedly stepped forward and pulled the curtain back on what she called a weird dynamic between the Braxton sisters and Birdman. And when that curtain moved, Toni Braxton reportedly broke down in tears. Not subtle tears, not polite tears. The kind that shake your shoulders and silence a room. It started with a resurfaced clip from a recent appearance where DaBrat, visibly frustrated, hinted that somebody else's moment was hijacked because of offstage drama involving Tamar and Birdman. She didn't name names at first. She didn't have to. The internet filled in the blanks, because the timeline has always felt off. Tamar wiping Birdman's sweat on stage like a wife. The sisters side-eyeing from the wings, old rumours about who dated him first, whispers about crossed boundaries that were never addressed publicly. And now DaBrat, allegedly saying out loud what fans have been whispering for years. Y'all got the timeline twisted. That sentence alone sent social media into cardiac arrest. Because if the timeline is twisted, that means someone's version of history is false. And when family history gets exposed in public, it's not tea, it's betrayal. Insiders claim there was an explosive confrontation backstage after DaBrat's comments started trending. Raised voices, accusations about loyalty. One sister allegedly yelling, "You don't know the half of it." Half of what? That's the question tearing the internet apart right now. Because if Birdman was more than just Toni's man at some point, if Tamar really was involved first, if boundaries were blurred inside that family before cameras ever rolled, this isn't just messy nostalgia. It's a decades-old fracture finally splitting open. And if the alleged leaked voice recording from that backstage argument is real, the next 24 hours won't just trend. They'll detonate the entire Braxton narrative. The first crack didn't come from a headline. It came from a whisper behind the curtain. According to multiple insiders who claim they were present at the taping, tension was already thick in the air before DaBrat ever picked up a microphone. The conversation was supposed to be celebratory, nostalgic, focused on legacy. Instead, the name that kept floating like smoke in the room was Birdman. And once that name was spoken aloud, something shifted. DaBrat allegedly leaned forward and said, "Y'all keep acting like this started one way, but that ain't the truth." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was loaded. Because sitting in that room were members of the Braxton sisters, a family that has built an empire on vulnerability, unity, and sisterhood, now being forced to confront a timeline the public thought it understood. And then the bomb dropped. Sources claim DaBrat made it clear that Tamar Braxton's connection to Birdman did not begin as a supporting sister dynamic. According to what insiders are calling an unfiltered moment, DaBrat allegedly said, "Tamar had that situation first, let's stop pretending." First. That word detonated the room, because for years, the narrative painted Toni Braxton as the one who ended up with Birdman after a long friendship turned romance. Tamar's onstage affection, wiping sweat, leaning in close, moving with wife-level familiarity, was dismissed as over-the-top sisterly enthusiasm. But if Tamar was involved first, if the relationship didn't start with Toni, then the optics flip entirely. And that's when insiders say Toni's composure cracked. Witnesses claim she went still at first, hands folded, eyes lowered. Then someone allegedly mentioned old agreements and family boundaries, and Toni's eyes filled instantly. Not subtle, not performative. Real. One source described it as years of unspoken tension pouring out at once. Meanwhile, social media exploded. Clips from that infamous Versus appearance resurfaced immediately. Tamar hovering around Birdman, or dabbing his forehead, stopping him from drinking too much, moving with a level of intimacy that made fans uncomfortable at the time. Back then, critics called it inappropriate. Now, they're calling it evidence. And it gets messier. A blogger with a long memory resurfaced a 2003 rumour alleging that Tamar and Birdman were quietly involved before Toni's name ever entered the picture. The rumour was dismissed at the time as industry gossip. But now, with DaBrat allegedly confirming that timeline, those dusty blog posts look less fictional. Then came the alleged backstage audio, a 17-second clip circulating in private group chats. The voices aren't crystal clear, but one female voice can be heard saying, "You don't bring that up on camera." Another voice, believed by some to be Tamar, responds, "It's the truth." If that clip is authentic, it confirms this wasn't a controlled conversation. It was an ambush. And in the middle of it, Toni. Insiders claim she stood up at one point and said, "Why now? Why now?" That question cuts deeper than any denial. Because if the timeline has always been known privately, why expose it publicly? Some fans are accusing DaBrat of hijacking the moment to defend Tamar. Others believe she was correcting a narrative that unfairly painted Tamar as a man-stealer. But the real fracture isn't between fans. It's inside the family. Because Tawanda and Trina, according to alleged eyewitnesses, were visibly uncomfortable. Tawanda reportedly muttered, "This is exactly why we don't talk about certain things." Certain things, plural, meaning Birdman may not be the only buried topic. And then, like gasoline on an already raging fire, an old interview resurfaced where Tamar once laughed off rumours about her being too close to Birdman, saying, "I love him like family." Family. That word is aging badly right now, because if love started romantically and later got rebranded as family, the emotional residue doesn't disappear. It just gets repackaged. And fans are ruthless. Twitter threads are mapping the timeline like investigators. 2003 alleged involvement. 2016 public Toni romance rumours. Tamar's hyper-intimate on-stage behaviour. The sisters' awkward body language during joint appearances. TikTok creators are analysing micro-expressions frame by frame. One viral post read, "We thought Tamar was doing too much. Now it looks like she was doing too much for a reason." Meanwhile, DaBrat doubled down. In a follow-up comment that sent shockwaves through the fan base, as she allegedly said, "Y'all judged Tamar for being comfortable, but you didn't know she had history." History. That's not accidental language, that's confirmation. But here's where the betrayal angle intensifies. Sources claim Toni felt blindsided, not by the existence of the history, but by the public exposure of it. According to someone claiming to be close to her camp, Toni believed that whatever past Tamar had with Birdman was resolved, acknowledged privately, and buried for the sake of family peace. Buried. And DaBrat just unearthed it. The internet is now asking the question no one wanted to say out loud. Did Toni knowingly pursue Birdman after Tamar? Or did Tamar overstate a casual fling as something more? Because if Toni crossed a boundary with her sister's former man, the narrative of Tamar as the reckless sibling collapses. And if Tamar exaggerated the depth of her involvement, the victim narrative collapses too. Either way, the illusion of seamless sisterhood is cracking. Then came the most chilling rumour yet. A longtime industry insider posted cryptically, "There's a reason Birdman never publicly clarified the timeline." Never clarified. Silence can be strategic. Silence can protect multiple people at once. And if Birdman has known all along that both sisters had emotional ties to him at different points, that's not just messy. That's a triangle with no clean edges. Right now, Toni hasn't issued a statement. Tamar hasn't gone live. Birdman hasn't posted. But the silence is vibrating. Because if Toni decides to address this directly, with receipts, dates, proof, the entire Braxton legacy narrative could tilt overnight. And if Tamar decides to tell her full version of events, someone's reputation inside that family will fracture permanently. The only certainty. This wasn't just a random comment. It was a spark thrown onto years of dry, unspoken tension. And if that alleged longer audio from backstage leaks in full, the next explosion won't just shake social media. It will split the Braxton story wide open. The longer audio didn't leak all at once. It trickled. First 17 seconds, then 32. Then nearly 2 full minutes of what insiders are calling the argument that changed everything. The clip allegedly opens with a sharp voice saying, "Why would you do that on camera?" Another voice fires back, "Because I'm tired of the lie. Tired of the lie." If authentic, that one sentence reframes the entire saga. Because now this isn't just messy history. It's a suppressed narrative that someone finally refused to protect. Listeners online are convinced one of the voices belongs to Tamar Braxton. The tone? Defensive. Emotional. Almost trembling. Another voice, believed by some to be Toni Braxton, sounds controlled but wounded. At one point, the alleged Toni voice says, "That was years ago. We moved past that. Moved past." That phrasing implies acknowledgement. Not denial. Acknowledgement. The internet caught it immediately. Because if something was moved past, it existed. And if it existed, the timeline just got real. Meanwhile, DaBrat has reportedly been receiving both praise and backlash. Some fans are applauding her for defending Tamar's name. Others accuse her of inserting herself into family business that should have stayed sealed. But the real damage isn't online. It's internal. Sources close to the Braxton sisters claim that the family group chat blew up the night the audio began circulating. Raised voices, accusations about loyalty. One sister allegedly saying, "You always do this when cameras are around." That statement alone suggests a pattern. And patterns inside families are rarely accidental. Then came the timeline breakdown that sent Twitter into full investigative mode. Old reports from the early 2000s suggest Birdman and Tamar were seen together privately before Toni's name was ever connected publicly. No confirmation at the time, just whispers. Industry chatter. Fast forward years later, Toni and Birdman become public. Engagement rumours, joint appearances, and Tamar's infamous on-stage behaviour during the Versu's performance. Wiping sweat, hovering close, speaking with familiar ease. At the time, fans called it doing too much. Now it's being reframed as unfinished business, and here's where it escalates. A blogger claiming to have spoken to someone in Birdman's camp alleges that he once told a friend, "I never picked sides." Never picked sides. That sentence is chilling. Because if both sisters had emotional proximity to him at different points, and he navigated both without clearly defining boundaries, the responsibility doesn't sit neatly on one shoulder. It splinters. Meanwhile, Tawanda's old televised confrontation resurfaced again. The one where she accused Tamar of sleeping with 2 of Toni's men. At the time, fans thought it was exaggerated reality TV drama. Now? It feels like foreshadowing, because if Birdman was one, who was the second? Speculation has dragged in old names, old exes, old rumours about overlapping relationships that were never publicly confirmed. And the deeper fans dig, the more complicated it gets. But here's the emotional core of the explosion. Sources claim Toni's tears backstage weren't about Birdman. They were about exposure. One insider allegedly said, "She felt like the family pact was broken." Family pact. That phrase suggests something was mutually agreed upon long ago. A decision to protect each other publicly, no matter what the private history looked like, and DaBrat shattered it. Or, depending on who you ask, liberated it. Because Tamar's supporters argue she's been painted as reckless for years. Painted as jealous. Painted as inappropriate with Birdman during public appearances. If she had history first, then those optics weren't random. They were emotional residue. But if Toni believed the past was settled and forgiven, then dragging it back into the spotlight feels like betrayal. The internet is now divided into camps. Team Tamar, arguing she was unfairly judged for affection that had roots. Team Toni, arguing that past flings don't justify public boundary blurring once a sister is involved. Team Birdman is the problem, pointing out that the man at the centre has remained almost completely silent. And that silence is strategic. Because if he confirms Tamar first, Toni's narrative shifts. If he denies Tamar's depth, Tamar's credibility shifts. Either way, his words would detonate something irreversible. Then came the alleged text leak. A screenshot circulating online claims to show Tamar texting someone, "I kept quiet for years." No metadata, no confirmation. But the timing of the leak, right after the audio, makes it explosive. Because if she truly kept quiet for years about dating Birdman first, that means the public narrative has been incomplete the entire time, and incomplete narratives breed resentment. Meanwhile, fans noticed something subtle but significant. Toni removed a recent photo featuring Birdman from her Instagram grid. No announcement, no explanation, just gone. Deletion is rarely accidental in celebrity optics. Is it damage control? Or distancing? Or something deeper? And just when things couldn't get more combustible, a veteran entertainment journalist tweeted, "There are NDAs involved in this situation." NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. If true, that means certain details may have been contractually silenced for years. And if those contracts are expiring or being ignored, this could be only the beginning. The most unsettling rumour? There's an unaired segment from a previous taping where the sisters almost addressed this years ago, but producers cut it to protect the brand. If that footage surfaces, it won't just validate one side. It will confirm that the tension has been simmering far longer than fans realised. Right now, the emotional temperature inside that family is reportedly icy. No group photos, no joint statements, just separate silences. And silence in a family that built its fame on transparency? That's louder than screaming. Because the question no one can answer yet is this: was this about love or loyalty? And if loyalty was sacrificed for truth, what else inside that family has been quietly rewritten? Or the explosion everyone feared finally detonated when the unedited clip surfaced, not the 2-minute fragment, not the muffled argument, the full, raw, unfiltered exchange. And when it dropped, it didn't just trend, Saray, it scorched. The video allegedly shows DaBrat leaning forward, eyes locked, voice steady but charged, saying, "Stop acting like she stole something that was hers first. Hers first." The camera allegedly cuts to Toni Braxton, face stiff, lips pressed tight. She doesn't interrupt. She doesn't roll her eyes. She just exhales. And then it happens. Toni's voice cracks. "I didn't know it was that serious," she reportedly says. That sentence hit harder than any accusation. Because if she didn't know it was serious, then Tamar believed it was. And that gap in perception? That's where betrayal lives. Now, sources say Tamar Braxton was visibly shaking in the clip, not angry, not screaming, shaking. "I told you how I felt," she allegedly says. "You said it was nothing." Nothing. That word has become the villain of the week. Because what one sister labels nothing, the other may carry as emotional history. And in a family already layered with old resentments, financial disputes, loyalty tests, and televised confrontations, this wasn't just about a man. It was about validation. Meanwhile, Birdman remained conspicuously silent. No denial, no clarification, no timeline correction, just stillness. And that stillness is fueling the most dangerous theory yet, that he benefited from the ambiguity. Because if both sisters had separate emotional chapters with him at different times, and he allowed those chapters to overlap without clarity, then the weirdness wasn't accidental. It was structural. The internet now believes the weird relationship DaBrat referenced wasn't about romance alone, it was about blurred lines, emotional favoritism, backstage alliances, subtle shifts in energy whenever Birdman was present. Fans are now revisiting old episodes of the family's reality series, analysing body language during scenes where Birdman was mentioned, Tamar's tone, Toni's pauses, Tawanda's side glances. Everything feels loaded in hindsight. Then came the alleged bombshell text, a screenshot posted by an anonymous account claims to show Birdman texting someone, "I thought y'all was cool with it." Cool with it. If authentic, that suggests he believed the sisters had an understanding. But understanding requires transparency, and transparency seems to have been missing. Meanwhile, the family fracture widened. Insiders claim Towanda privately told someone, "This is exactly why we kept it buried." Buried. Another confirmation that the history was real. Not invented, not exaggerated, real. But here's the twist that sent shockwaves through the fan base. A longtime producer from the family's show allegedly confirmed in a cryptic tweet that there was once a storyline about complicated romantic overlap that never aired. Never aired. Because it was deemed too damaging, too explosive, too risky for the brand. And now it's unraveling anyway. Toni reportedly left the taping early. No dramatic exit, just a quiet departure. That quietness is devastating, because Toni has always carried herself as composed, regal, controlled. Tears on camera weren't part of her brand. And now, the internet has frozen her most vulnerable moment into viral clips. Meanwhile, Tamar's supporters are rallying hard. They're arguing she's been vilified for years over that infamous Verzeus moment, wiping Birdman's forehead, hovering protectively, stopping him from drinking. They're saying it wasn't disrespect. It was unresolved emotion. And if that's true, then the public shaming she endured was misplaced. But Toni's defenders argue something equally powerful. Even if Tamar had history first, once Toni and Birdman became public, boundaries should have shifted. History doesn't override present loyalty. And that's where the fracture is irreparable, because one sister sees reclamation, the other sees betrayal. And at the center of it all, a man who has yet to clarify a single date. The most chilling development came late last night. An entertainment journalist tweeted, "There's a contract clause that prevented full disclosure years ago." Contract clause, meaning money may have been tied to silence. If that's true, then this wasn't just family tension. It was business, brand management, strategic omission. And now that the lid is off, there's no clean way to close it again. The internet is now asking the question no one in that room wanted answered. If Birdman was emotionally involved with Tamar first, and Toni pursued him later knowing that history, was that love? Or was that competition? And if Tamar never truly healed from that chapter, did her onstage behavior reflect resentment masked as support? This is no longer about who dated who first. It's about whether sisterhood was compromised for romance, and whether silence protected unity or just delayed the explosion. The final rumor circling like a storm cloud. There's a private family meeting scheduled, no cameras, no producers, just the sisters. If that meeting leaks even a fraction of what's said inside, the narrative won't just shift again, it will split permanently. Because once trust fractures publicly, repair becomes nearly impossible. Right now, fans aren't just watching for clarification. They're watching for allegiance. Who stands with who goes quiet, who distances. Because silence now doesn't feel like peace. It feels like strategy. And the biggest question still hanging in the air is this. If DaBrat hadn't said anything, would the truth have stayed buried forever? Or was this eruption inevitable? Either way, one thing is certain. The Braxton story will never look the same again, and the next person to speak could either mend the fracture or finish breaking it. If you thought this was just another celebrity rumor, think again. This isn't tea. This is a family fracture unfolding in real time. A leaked backstage confrontation, a decades-old timeline dragged into the spotlight, DaBrat refusing to stay silent, Toni Braxton in tears, Tamar Braxton shaking while defending her truth, and Birdman saying absolutely nothing while the storm rages around him. That silence, it's louder than any confession. So now I need to hear from you. Was this overdue truth finally being told? Or did DaBrat light a match that should have never been struck? If Tamar had history first, does that change how you see everything? And if Toni knew more than she let on, what does that mean for sisterhood? Drop your unfiltered thoughts in the comments right now, because this conversation is not simple, and the sharpest takes always rise to the top. Hit that like button if you want more deep dives that cut through the surface narrative. Subscribe immediately so you don't miss the next update, because if Birdman finally speaks, or if one of the sisters breaks her silence again, it will flip everything overnight. Turn on notifications, because in situations like this, one statement can rewrite years of history. And trust me, this story is